Forms of government and political systems. Democracy. A system of government where power is vested in the people, who rule either directly or through freely elected representatives. It emphasizes individual rights, equality, and participation in decision-making processes. Republic. A form of government in which the country is considered a public matter, and the head of state is an elected or nominated president, not a monarch. Monarchy. A government system where a single person, the monarch, rules until death or abdication. Monarchies can be absolute, where the monarch has unrestricted power, or constitutional, where they operate under a constitution limiting their powers. Constitutional monarchy. A form of monarchy in which the monarch's powers are limited by a constitution, and actual governance is carried out by elected officials. Oligarchy. A power structure where a small group of people, often from the same socioeconomic class, holds control over a country or organization. Aristocracy. A form of government in which power is held by the nobility, often hereditary, emphasizing privilege and status. Plutocracy. Governance by the wealthy, where power is effectively controlled by those with significant economic resources. Theocracy. A system of government in which priests or religious leaders rule in the name of a deity, and religious law is used as the legal framework. Autocracy. A system of government where supreme power is concentrated in the hands of one individual, whose decisions are subject to neither external legal restraints nor regularized mechanisms of popular control. Dictatorship. An authoritarian form of government characterized by a single leader or group wielding absolute power, often obtained and maintained by force. Totalitarianism. An extreme form of authoritarianism where the state seeks to control every aspect of public and private life, often through coercion and repression. Anarchy. The absence of a governing body or authority, leading to a state of lawlessness and disorder. Federalism. A system of government where power is divided between a central authority and constituent political units, like states or provinces. Confederation. A union of sovereign groups or states united for purposes of common action, often with a weak central authority. Unitary state. A state governed as a single entity where the central government holds supreme authority, and any administrative divisions exercise only powers delegated by the central government. Parliamentary system. A democratic form of government where the executive derives its legitimacy from and is accountable to the legislature. The executive and legislative branches are interconnected. Presidential system. A democratic and republican system of government where a head of government leads an executive branch that is separate from the legislative branch. Semi-presidential system. A system of government where a president exists alongside a prime minister and a cabinet, with the latter two being responsible to the legislature of a state. Technocracy. A system of governance where decision-makers are selected based on their expertise in a given area, particularly scientific or technical knowledge. Kleptocracy. A form of corrupt government where the ruling class seeks personal gain and status at the expense of the governed, often through embezzlement of state funds. Principles and concepts of governance. Rule of law. The principle that all individuals and institutions are subject to and accountable to law that is fairly applied and enforced. Separation of powers. A governance model that divides the state into distinct branches, typically executive, legislative, and judicial, to prevent the concentration of power. Checks and balances. Mechanisms that allow each branch of government to amend or veto acts of another, branch to prevent any one branch from exerting too much power. Sovereignty, the full right and power of a governing body to govern itself without any interference from outside sources or bodies. Legitimacy, the general belief that a particular government has the right to rule or exercise authority. Transparency, the openness of government processes and decisions, allowing citizens to have access to information and understand governmental actions. Transparency, the openness of government processes and decisions, allowing citizens to have access to information and understand governmental actions. Accountability, the obligation of government officials to be answerable for their actions and decisions to the public and legislative bodies. Participation, the involvement of citizens in the political process, including voting, attending town hall meetings, and engaging in public discourse. Equity, the principle of fairness in governance, ensuring all individuals have equal access to opportunities and resources. Efficiency, the ability of the government to deliver services and implement policies effectively with minimal waste of resources. Institutions and structures. Executive branch, the part of government responsible for implementing and enforcing laws, typically headed by the President or Prime Minister. Legislative branch, the lawmaking body of government, often composed of elected representatives in a parliament or Congress. Judicial branch, the system of courts that interprets and applies the law in the name of the state. Bureaucracy, a system of government in which most of the important decisions are made by state officials rather than by elected representatives. Civil service, the permanent professional branches of a government's administration, excluding military and judicial branches and elected politicians. Cabinet, a body of high-ranking state officials, typically consisting of the top leaders of the executive branch. Parliament, the supreme legislative body in a country, especially in systems following the Westminster model. Senate, a legislative chamber in the bicameral legislature of many countries, often considered the upper house. House of Representatives, the lower house in a bicameral legislature, representing the population proportionally. Ombudsman, an independent official appointed to investigate individuals' complaints against maladministration, especially that of public authorities. Regulatory agency, a public authority or government agency, responsible for exercising autonomous authority over some area of human activity in a regulatory or supervisory capacity. Municipality, a city or town that has corporate status and local government. Council, an assembly of people elected to manage the affairs of a city, county, or other municipal district. Board of Directors, a group of individuals elected to represent shareholders and oversee the activities and direction of a company. Quango, an acronym for quasi-autonomous non-governmental organization, a body that has some governmental responsibilities but operates independently of direct government control. Think tank, a body of experts providing advice and ideas on specific political or economic problems. Intergovernmental organization, an organization composed primarily of sovereign states, established by a treaty or other agreement. Non-governmental organization. A non-profit group that operates independently of any government, typically one whose purpose is to address a social or political issue. Civil society organization. A non-governmental organization that represents the interests and will of citizens. Electoral systems and processes. Electoral systems and processes. Election. A formal group decision-making process by which a population chooses individuals to hold public office. Referendum. A direct vote in which an entire electorate is invited to vote on a particular proposal. Plebiscite. A direct vote by the electorate on an important public question, such as a change in the Constitution. Suffrage. The right to vote in political elections. Franchise. The right to vote in public elections. Also refers to the act of granting such a right. Electorate. All the people in a country or area who are entitled to vote in an election. Ballot. A process of voting in writing and typically in secret. Gerrymandering. The manipulation of electoral district boundaries for political advantage. First past the post. An electoral system where the candidate with the most votes in a constituency wins. Proportional representation. An electoral system in which parties gain seats in proportion to the number of votes cast for them. Electoral college. A body of representatives chosen by voters to formally elect the President and Vice President of the United States. Runoff election. A second election held to determine a winner when no candidate meets the required threshold for victory in the first election. Voter turnout. The percentage of eligible voters who cast a ballot in an election. Electoral fraud. Illegal interference with the process of an election, including tampering with ballots or vote counts. Incumbent. The current holder of a political office. Challenger. A person who runs against the incumbent in an election. Campaign finance. The fundraising and spending that political candidates and parties engage in to promote their electoral campaigns. Political Action Committee. An organization that collects political donations from its members and uses these funds to support or oppose candidates, legislation, or ballot initiatives. Super PAC. An independent political committee that may raise unlimited sums of money from corporations, unions, and individuals, but is not permitted to contribute directly to or coordinate directly with parties or candidates. Gerrymandering. The practice of manipulating the boundaries of electoral constituencies to favor one party or class. Policy, law, and rulemaking. Public policy. A system of laws, regulatory measures, courses of action, and funding priorities set by a government or its officials to address public issues. It reflects societal values and guides decision-making in areas like health, education, economy, and security. Legislation. Laws that have been enacted by a legislature or other governing body. Legislation serves as the framework within which all members of society must operate, providing rules, rights, and responsibilities. Statute. A formal written law passed by a legislative body at the national or state level. Statutes outline legal standards and are enforceable by judicial systems. Bill. a draft of a proposed law presented to a legislature for enactment. A bill becomes law after it is debated, approved, and signed by the appropriate executive authority. Ordinance. A law or regulation made by a local government authority, such as a city or town council. Ordinances typically govern matters not covered by national or state laws. Regulation. A rule or directive made and maintained by an authority to control or govern conduct, particularly in administrative law. Decree. An official order issued by a legal authority, often used in authoritarian or emergency situations to impose immediate rules or actions. Executive order. A directive issued by a head of state, like the president or prime minister, to manage operations within the executive branch of government. It has the force of law but bypasses the legislative process. Judicial review. The process by which courts interpret the constitutionality of legislative acts or executive actions. It serves as a check on the powers of the legislative and executive branches. Amendment. A formal change or addition proposed or made to a law, constitution, or legal document. Amendments are used to update, clarify, or correct existing laws. Public administration and governance practices. Public administration. The implementation of government policies and the management of public programs by civil servants. It encompasses planning, organizing, directing, coordinating, and controlling government operations. Bureaucracy. A system of government or management where decisions are made by state officials or administrative departments rather than elected representatives. It's known for hierarchical structure, procedures, and red tape. Red tape. Excessive bureaucracy or adherence to formal rules and procedures, often resulting in delay or inaction. It symbolizes inefficiency in administrative systems. Governance. The processes and decisions that define actions, grant power, and verify performance in institutions. It involves transparency, accountability, effectiveness, and rule of law. Good governance. A style of administration that is transparent, accountable, participatory, and equitable. It promotes human rights, justice, and sustainable development. E-governance. The use of digital tools and systems by governments to improve the delivery of services, interaction with citizens, and internal operations. Decentralization. The distribution of administrative powers or functions from a central authority to local governments or regional agencies. It enhances local decision-making and efficiency. Centralization. The concentration of administrative power in a central authority, often leading to uniform policies, but sometimes criticized for limiting local autonomy. Public sector reform. Changes aimed at improving the structure, efficiency, and effectiveness of public sector institutions. Reforms can include privatization, digitization, or reducing corruption. Corruption, misgovernance, and bad practices. Corruption. The abuse of entrusted power for private gain. It can take many forms, including bribery, embezzlement, nepotism, and kickbacks, undermining trust in governance. Bribery. Offering, giving, receiving, or soliciting something of value as a means to influence the actions of an official or other person in charge of a public or legal duty. Embezzlement. The theft or misappropriation of funds or property entrusted to one's care, especially by a public official or corporate officer. Nepotism, the unfair practice of giving jobs or favorable treatment to relatives or friends, especially in politics or administration, regardless of merit. Cronyism, favoring friends or associates in political or business appointments, often at the expense of qualified candidates or ethical standards. Clientelism, a political system where goods or services are exchanged for political support. It often leads to favoritism and neglect of broader public interest. Patronage, the power to appoint people to government jobs or award them favors, often used to maintain political support rather than based on merit. State capture, a form of corruption in which private interests significantly influence a state's decision-making processes to their own advantage. Conflict of interest, a situation in which a person or institution is involved in multiple interests, financial or otherwise, and serving one interest could involve working against another. Misappropriation, the intentional, illegal use of the property or funds of another person or entity for one's own use or unauthorized purpose, often seen in public office. Fraud, wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain, particularly through falsification or misrepresentation. Lack of transparency, the failure of a government or institution to openly share information, which hinders accountability and allows unethical behavior to go unnoticed. Authoritarianism, a form of governance characterized by strong central power and limited political freedoms. It often suppresses dissent and lacks democratic accountability. Repression, the act of subduing someone or something by force. In governance, it refers to the restriction of civil liberties or political opposition through coercion. Censorship, the suppression or prohibition of speech, public communication, or other information that may be considered objectionable by a governing body. Propaganda, information, often biased or misleading, used to promote a political cause or point of view. It is a common tool in authoritarian regimes to control public opinion. Election rigging, manipulating the outcome of an election through fraudulent means such as vote tampering, voter intimidation, or false counts. State-sponsored violence, the use of force or violence by a government against its own people, including police brutality, military crackdowns, or unjust imprisonment. Suppression of press freedom, controlling or silencing journalists, media outlets, and access to information to prevent the public from knowing the truth about governance. Institutional decay, the gradual loss of effectiveness and legitimacy in public institutions, often due to corruption, neglect, or failure to reform. Global governance and international relations. Global governance, the collective management of international affairs through institutions, agreements, and cooperation between countries. It includes organizations like the United Nations, WTO, and treaties that regulate global peace, trade, and climate. Diplomacy, the practice of managing international relations through negotiation, dialogue, and compromise rather than conflict. It is key in maintaining peaceful and productive interactions between nations. International law, a body of rules and norms that govern relationships between sovereign states and other global actors. It covers issues such as war, diplomacy, human rights, and environmental regulation. Treaty, a formal agreement between two or more countries or international entities that is legally binding under international law. Treaties can address trade, defense, environment, or human rights. Bilateral relations. The political, economic, or cultural relationship between two sovereign states. Bilateral agreements are negotiated directly between the two parties. Multilateralism. A system of coordinating foreign policy between three or more countries. Multilateral agreements and organizations aim to solve issues that affect multiple nations, like climate change or trade. Sovereignty. The authority of a state to govern itself without outside interference. Sovereignty is central to international law and relations, emphasizing independence and territorial integrity. Geopolitics. The study of how geography influences political power, strategies, and international relations. It includes issues like border conflicts, natural resources, and strategic alliances. Foreign aid. Assistance given by one country to another, often in the form of financial support, goods or services, to promote development, respond to crises, or influence governance. Peacekeeping. The deployment of international forces, usually under the United Nations, to help maintain or restore peace in conflict zones through monitoring, negotiation, and protection. Sanctions. Penalties imposed by one or more countries against another, often to influence behavior or policies. They may include trade restrictions, asset freezes, or travel bans. Development assistance. Financial or technical support provided to developing countries by international donors, aimed at improving infrastructure, education, health, or governance. Global South. A term used to describe developing nations, particularly in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, in discussions of global inequality, governance, and aid. Elections, representation, and civic participatio. Democratic elections. A process in which citizens choose their leaders or representatives through free, fair, and regular voting, ensuring political accountability and legitimacy. Universal suffrage. The right of all adult citizens to vote in an election, regardless of gender, race, status, or education. It's a cornerstone of democratic governance. Voter turnout. The percentage of eligible voters who actually cast their ballots in an election. High turnout is often seen as a sign of civic engagement. Electoral system. The method used to count votes and allocate seats in a legislature or choose a leader. Examples include proportional representation and first past the post. Representation. The act of elected officials serving as the voice of their constituents in government, shaping policy based on the public's interests and concerns. Political participation. Any activity by citizens that involves them in the political process, including voting, protesting, joining political parties, or civic campaigning. Ballot. A physical or electronic means by which voters indicate their choices during an election. Secret ballots protect voter privacy and prevent coercion. Campaign. Organized efforts by candidates or parties to win votes, including speeches, debates, advertising, and public engagement. Constituency. A geographic area represented by an elected official. Constituents are the people living in that area who vote in the election. Polling station. A location where voters go to cast their votes during an election. It is managed by an electoral commission or similar authority. Civic duty. The responsibilities of a citizen, including voting, obeying laws, and engaging in public discourse to support the community and democracy. Recall election. A special vote to remove an elected official from office before the end of their term, typically initiated by a public petition. Electoral integrity. The credibility and fairness of an electoral process. It requires transparency, security, independence of electoral bodies, and public trust. Gerrymandering. Manipulating the boundaries of electoral districts to favor one party or group, often undermining fair representation and democracy. Electoral reform. Changes proposed or implemented to improve fairness, transparency, or efficiency in the electoral process, such as new voting technologies or systems. Leadership, authority, and power structures. Leadership. The act of guiding, influencing, and directing individuals or groups to achieve goals. In governance, effective leadership combines vision, ethics, and decision-making ability. Authority. The legitimate power given to individuals or institutions to make decisions, enforce rules, and maintain order. Authority can be legal, traditional, or charismatic. Power. The capacity to influence the behavior of others, control resources, or shape outcomes. In governance, power can be exercised through laws, policies, persuasion, or force. Mandate. The authority granted to elected officials by the electorate to carry out policies promised during a campaign. A strong mandate implies broad public support. Bureaucracy. A hierarchical administrative system run by appointed officials that implements government policy and services. Bureaucracy ensures consistency, but can also become inefficient. Cabinet. A group of high-ranking officials, typically ministers, who advise the head of government and make collective decisions on executive matters. Executive power. The authority to enforce laws and administer public policy. In most systems, this power lies with the president, prime minister, or governor. Legislative power. The authority to make or change laws. This power is typically held by a parliament or Congress elected by the people. Judicial power. The authority held by courts to interpret laws, settle disputes, and uphold justice. An independent judiciary is essential for rule of law. Devolution. The transfer of powers from a central government to regional or local governments. It allows for more localized and responsive governance. Decentralization. The redistribution of decision-making authority from central to lower levels of government, often to improve efficiency and community engagement. Checks and balances. A system that ensures no single branch of government becomes too powerful by allowing each branch to limit the powers of the others. Accountability. The obligation of leaders and institutions to explain their actions and accept responsibility, especially when they misuse power or resources. Technocracy. A system of governance where decision-makers are selected based on their technical expertise and knowledge rather than political affiliation. Oligarchy. A form of power structure where a small group of people, often from the same social, economic, or political class, hold control. Governance reforms, policy tools, and evaluatio. Policy reform. The process of changing existing laws, regulations, or practices to improve governance, address inefficiencies, or meet new challenges. Reforms can target economic, social, or political issues. Regulation. Rules or directives created by governing bodies to control or supervise specific activities within a society, industry, or field. Regulations ensure order, safety, and fairness. Public policy. A system of laws, actions, and decisions that reflect the values and goals of a government. Public policies often address issues such as health, education, and economic growth. Policy implementation. The phase in which government policies are put into action by the appropriate authorities, agencies, or departments. It involves resource allocation, logistics, and oversight. Policy evaluation. The assessment of a policy's effectiveness, efficiency, and impact. Evaluation helps determine whether the policy achieves its intended goals and whether any modifications are necessary. Cost-benefit analysis. A method of comparing the costs of a policy or program to the expected benefits in order to determine its value or feasibility. It helps guide decision-making and governance. Risk management. The identification, assessment, and prioritization of risks, followed by the application of resources to minimize or control the probability of negative outcomes in governance. Public-private partnerships. Collaborations between government agencies and private sector companies to finance, build, and operate projects such as infrastructure, healthcare, or education. Stakeholder engagement. The process of involving individuals, groups, or organizations that are affected by or have an interest in a policy or project. It helps ensure policies are inclusive and well-informed. Sustainability. The ability to manage resources and implement policies in a way that does not deplete or harm the environment, ensuring the well-being of future generations. Participatory governance. A governance model that actively involves citizens in the decision-making process, encouraging transparency, accountability, and shared responsibility. Governance innovation. The introduction of new approaches, technologies, or policies to address governance challenges in more effective or efficient ways. It can include digital government or novel public-private collaboration models. Institutional reform. Changes made to the structure or functioning of government institutions to improve efficiency, transparency, and public service delivery. Transparency. Openness in government actions, decisions, and processes. Transparency ensures that the public has access to information and can hold officials accountable. Anti-corruption measures. Policies and strategies designed to prevent corruption, such as the creation of watchdog agencies, anti-bribery laws, and transparency initiatives. Sustainability, global challenges, and future governance trends. Sustainable development. Development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It involves balancing economic, social, and environmental goals. Climate change mitigation. Efforts to reduce or prevent the emission of greenhouse gases, aiming to limit the extent of global warming and its effects on ecosystems and societies. Resilience. The ability of systems like communities, governments, economies to recover and adapt to shocks, such as natural disasters, economic crises, or political instability. Green governance. Policies and practices that prioritize environmental sustainability, reducing ecological footprints, and promoting green technologies and renewable energy. Globalization, the process of increased interconnectedness and interdependence of nations, economies, and cultures through trade, communication, and travel. It poses both challenges and opportunities for governance. Human rights, fundamental freedoms and protections that all individuals are entitled to, such as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. International organizations like the UN play a key role in advocating for these rights. Global health governance, international efforts to address public health challenges that cross borders, such as pandemics, infectious diseases, and health inequalities. It involves cooperation between countries and global organizations. International security, the protection of nations from external threats, including war, terrorism, and cyber attacks. It requires collaboration among countries to maintain peace and stability. Digital governance, the use of digital technologies and tools in the administration and operation of government functions, such as e-government services, digital identity systems, and online public consultations. Inclusive governance, ensuring that all segments of society, especially marginalized or vulnerable groups, have a voice in political decision-making processes, promoting fairness and equity. Circular economy, an economic model that prioritizes the reuse, recycling, and responsible use of resources to minimize waste and environmental impact, supporting long-term sustainability. Crisis management, the process of preparing for, responding to, and recovering from emergencies or crises, such as natural disasters, economic shocks, or political upheaval, to minimize harm to society and the economy. Smart cities, urban areas that use digital technology and data to improve efficiency, sustainability, and quality of life. Smart cities aim to reduce environmental impact and enhance service delivery to citizens. Global governance institutions, organizations like the United Nations, World Bank, and International Monetary Fund, which play a central role in addressing global issues such as conflict resolution, trade, and development. Climate justice, the concept that those who have contributed least to climate change should not bear the brunt of its impacts. It seeks to ensure that vulnerable populations are protected and compensated for climate-related damages. Social equity, fairness in the distribution of resources and opportunities, ensuring that all individuals, regardless of background, have equal access to services, education, and employment. Global economic governance, the management and regulation of the global economy through institutions like the International Monetary Fund and World Trade Organization, which address issues such as trade, debt, and economic stability. Future of work, the evolving nature of employment, labor markets, and job roles due to technological advancements, automation, and changing societal needs. Governments must adapt policies to support workers and promote fair labor practices. Policy coherence, ensuring that government policies across different sectors, such as economy, health, environment, education, are aligned and mutually supportive, preventing contradictions and inefficiencies. Intergenerational equity, the principle that current generations have a responsibility to ensure that future generations have the resources and opportunities needed for a healthy, prosperous life. Sustainable Development Goals, a set of 17 global objectives adopted by the United Nations to address poverty, inequality, climate change, and environmental degradation, aiming for a sustainable and equitable future for all. Biodiversity conservation, efforts to protect and preserve the variety of life on Earth, including species, ecosystems, and genetic diversity. It is crucial for maintaining healthy ecosystems and ensuring sustainable development. Green New Deal, a proposal aimed at addressing climate change and economic inequality by investing in clean energy, green technologies, and sustainable infrastructure, while creating jobs and stimulating the economy. Global governance reforms, changes in international institutions and systems designed to address modern challenges, such as increased multipolarity, regional conflicts, and new technologies. These reforms aim to make global governance more efficient and equitable. Sustainable finance, investment strategies and financial systems that support environmentally sustainable projects and companies, including green bonds and socially responsible investments. Civic technology, technological tools and platforms that enable citizens to engage in governance, participate in decision-making, and hold governments accountable, fostering greater transparency and responsiveness. Global solidarity, the unity and cooperation of nations in addressing global challenges such as climate change, poverty, and conflict. It is rooted in shared responsibility and mutual benefit. Environmental governance, the processes and practices that shape how societies manage their natural resources and environment, balancing economic growth with ecological protection. Inclusive growth, economic development that benefits all members of society, reducing inequality and ensuring that marginalized groups have opportunities for social and economic advancement. Future governance, the evolving methods and practices of governing that incorporate technology, innovation, and increased citizen participation to address modern-day global challenges. Sustainable infrastructure, the design, construction, and operation of infrastructure that minimizes environmental impact, uses renewable resources, and ensures long-term sustainability for communities. Environmental impact assessment, a process used to evaluate the potential environmental consequences of a proposed project or policy, helping to mitigate negative effects on the environment before implementation. Renewable energy policy, government policies aimed at encouraging the use of renewable energy sources such as wind, solar, and hydropower to reduce dependence on fossil fuels and combat climate change. Carbon footprint, the total amount of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere as a result of human activities, often measured in terms of tons of CO2 equivalent. It is a key indicator in the assessment of sustainability. Eco-taxation, taxes levied on activities that harm the environment, such as carbon emissions or the use of non-renewable resources. It encouraged businesses and individuals to adopt more sustainable practices. Circular economy policy, policies that promote a circular economy, where waste is minimized, resources are reused, and products are designed for longevity, recycling, or repurposing. Green bond, a type of bond issued to finance projects that have positive environmental or climate benefits, such as renewable energy installations or pollution control initiatives. Climate change adaptation, strategies and actions taken to adjust systems and practices in response to the impacts of climate change, such as rising sea levels or more frequent natural disasters. Urban sustainability, the concept of creating cities that are environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, and economically viable, with a focus on reducing waste, conserving resources, and promoting green spaces. Human security, a people-centered approach to security that focuses on protecting individuals from threats such as poverty, disease, human rights violations, and environmental disasters. Global health policy, policies that aim to improve global health outcomes by addressing public health issues that cross borders, such as pandemics, nutrition, and access to healthcare services. Disaster risk reduction, the actions taken to reduce the likelihood of disasters occurring and to minimize their impact, particularly in vulnerable areas. This includes preparedness, mitigation, and response strategies. International climate agreements, treaties or accords between countries aimed at addressing global climate change. The Paris Agreement is one of the most notable examples, with countries committing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Multilateralism, a foreign policy approach that emphasizes cooperation among multiple countries to address global challenges, as opposed to unilateral or bilateral action. It is central to international organizations like the United Nations. Sustainable fisheries, policies and practices designed to manage fish stocks and marine ecosystems in a way that ensures fish populations are maintained and the health of the oceans is preserved. Environmental justice, the fair treatment of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Social sustainability, policies and practices that promote social inclusion, equity, and the well-being of all individuals, ensuring that economic development benefits everyone, particularly marginalized groups. Carbon pricing, a method of reducing global warming by putting a price on carbon emissions, either through a carbon tax or a cap-and-trade system. This incentivizes businesses to reduce their carbon footprint. Gender-responsive governance, governance that takes into account the needs and priorities of all genders, ensuring equality and non-discrimination in policy decisions and public services. Urban resilience, the ability of cities to withstand and recover from shocks, such as natural disasters or economic downturns, by building adaptive capacity and sustainable infrastructure. Global digital governance, the set of policies and frameworks that govern the use of digital technologies across borders, including issues such as internet governance, privacy, and cybersecurity. Climate financing, funding provided by governments, international organizations, or private institutions to support climate change mitigation and adaptation projects, especially in developing countries. Food security policy, government policies designed to ensure that all people have access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food at all times, addressing issues like food scarcity, malnutrition, and inequality. Youth participation in governance, policies that encourage the active involvement of young people in political processes, decision-making, and leadership roles to ensure their voices are heard in shaping the future. Data governance, the management of data availability, usability, integrity, and security within an organization or country, ensuring that data is used responsibly and ethically in decision-making. Greenwashing, the practice of companies or governments exaggerating or falsifying their environmental efforts to appear more eco-friendly than they are. It undermines genuine sustainability efforts. Humanitarian aid, assistance provided to people affected by crises such as natural disasters, conflict, or extreme poverty. It aims to alleviate suffering and provide basic needs, such as food, shelter, and medical care. The government. The use of information and communication technologies by government agencies to provide services to citizens, improve transparency, and increase efficiency. Global economic inequality. The growing disparity in income, wealth, and access to resources between and within countries. This gap poses a major challenge to global governance and sustainable development. Sustainable tourism. A form of tourism that minimizes the negative impacts on the environment and local communities, promotes conservation, and supports local economies in a responsible way. Conflict resolution. The methods and processes used to resolve disputes, disagreements, and conflicts, both within countries and between nations, often through negotiation, diplomacy, or international mediation. Ecosystem services. The benefits humans receive from ecosystems, such as clean air, water, food, and climate regulation. Protecting these services is vital for sustainable governance. Crisis diplomacy. The use of diplomatic channels and negotiations to resolve international crises, such as conflicts, environmental disasters, or economic emergencies, often through mediation or peace talks. Social entrepreneurship. Business ventures that aim to address social, environmental, or community challenges while generating profits. Social entrepreneurship integrates economic growth with social impact. Corporate social responsibility. The practice of companies taking responsibility for their impact on society and the environment, beyond profit-making, by engaging in ethical business practices and contributing to social good. Carbon neutrality. The process of balancing carbon emissions by offsetting them through measures such as carbon credits or by reducing emissions through energy efficiency and renewable energy. International aid. Financial or material assistance provided by one country to another, often aimed at helping with economic development, humanitarian relief, or environmental protection. Affordable housing. Government policies that ensure housing is affordable for all income levels, especially low-income families, often through subsidies, rent control, or public housing initiatives. Digital divide. The gap between individuals and communities with access to digital technologies and those without, which can exacerbate social and economic inequalities in governance. International collaboration. Cooperative efforts between countries to tackle global challenges, such as climate change, public health crises, and conflict resolution. Multilateral organizations play a central role in fostering such collaboration. Net zero emissions. The state in which a country or organization balances the amount of greenhouse gases emitted with an equivalent amount of emissions removed from the atmosphere, contributing to the fight against climate change. Global commons. Resources and spaces that are shared by all nations, such as the atmosphere, oceans, and outer space, which require cooperative management to prevent exploitation or depletion. Inclusive development. Economic and social development that is equitable, ensuring that all people have equal access to opportunities, resources, and benefits, particularly marginalized communities. Inclusive development. Economic and social development that is equitable, ensuring that all people have equal access to opportunities, resources, and benefits, particularly marginalized communities. Corporate governance. The system by which companies are directed and controlled, focusing on the roles and responsibilities of management, boards of directors, and shareholders in making decisions that benefit the organization and stakeholders. Decarbonization, the process of reducing carbon emissions from all sectors of the economy, especially through the adoption of renewable energy and energy-efficient technologies. International law, a body of legal rules and principles that govern the relations between states and other international actors, addressing issues such as trade, human rights, and environmental protection. Green growth, economic growth that is environmentally sustainable, driven by investments in green technologies, energy efficiency, and low-carbon industries. Social dialogue, the process by which governments, employers, and workers engage in discussions to improve labor conditions, social policies, and economic development. Public sector reform, the process of restructuring and improving the performance of government agencies and services, often to increase efficiency, reduce corruption, and enhance accountability. Global displacement, the forced movement of people due to conflicts, climate change, or human rights violations. Addressing displacement requires international cooperation and humanitarian action. Inclusive policy making, the involvement of diverse groups, including marginalized communities, in the process of policy development, ensuring that policies are representative and beneficial to all. Global public goods, goods and services that benefit all people across the world, such as clean air, global health initiatives, and peacekeeping, which require collective action and shared responsibility. Sustainable agriculture, farming practices that promote the health of ecosystems, reduce environmental degradation, and provide fair economic opportunities for farmers while ensuring food security for future generations. Universal access to education, the commitment to providing quality education to all individuals, regardless of their background, location, or socioeconomic status, as a means of promoting equality and opportunity. Global development goals, the broad set of international objectives aimed at improving the quality of life for all people, including ending poverty, reducing inequality, and ensuring environmental sustainability. Civil society, the collective term for non-governmental organizations, social movements, advocacy groups, and individuals who work to influence government policies, promote human rights, and advance social causes. Decentralized governance, a system where decision-making authority is distributed across multiple levels of government, allowing for more localized and flexible responses to issues. Peace building, efforts to create sustainable peace in post-conflict societies by addressing root causes of conflict, promoting reconciliation, and supporting economic and social recovery. Global partnerships, collaborative efforts between governments, businesses, and civil society to tackle global challenges such as poverty, climate change, and public health. Ethical governance, the application of moral principles and values in decision-making processes within governments, ensuring that actions are transparent, just, and equitable. Institutions and structures. Executive branch, the part of government responsible for implementing and enforcing laws, typically headed by the President or Prime Minister. Legislative branch, the lawmaking body of government, often composed of elected representatives in a parliament or Congress. Judicial branch, the system of courts that interprets and applies the law in the name of the state. Bureaucracy, a system of government in which most of the important decisions are made by state officials rather than by elected representatives. Civil service, the permanent professional branches of a government's administration, excluding military and judicial branches and elected politicians. Cabinet, a body of high-ranking state officials, typically consisting of the top leaders of the executive branch. Parliament, the supreme legislative body in a country, especially in systems following the Westminster model. Senate, a legislative chamber in the bicameral legislature of many countries, often considered the upper house. House of Representatives, the lower house in a bicameral legislature, representing the population proportionally. Ombudsman, an independent official appointed to investigate individuals' complaints against maladministration, especially that of public authorities. Regulatory agency, a public authority or government agency, responsible for exercising autonomous authority over some area of human activity in a regulatory or supervisory capacity. Municipality, a city or town that has corporate status and local government. Council, an assembly of people elected to manage the affairs of a city, county, or other municipal district. Board of Directors, a group of individuals elected to represent shareholders and oversee the activities and direction of a company. Quango, an acronym for quasi-autonomous non-governmental organization, a body that has some governmental responsibilities but operates independently of direct government control. Think tank, a body of experts providing advice and ideas on specific political or economic problems. Intergovernmental organization, an organization composed primarily of sovereign states, established by a treaty or other agreement. Non-governmental organization, a non-profit group that operates independently of any government, typically one whose purpose is to address a social or political issue. Civil society organization, a non-governmental organization that represents the interests and will of citizens.